Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. Thank God it's Friday. Nothing happened today. Not a thing. Oh, yeah, sure. Anyway, lots to discuss. We had a rather long game last night that I have to say, being the old man that I am, I fell asleep in the third overtime. People have to forgive me for that. But first, the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So I got a text today, and I understand why I got it. And it was a frequent follower, and they were like, bigger train wreck, the Philadelphia 76ers or the Toronto Maple Leafs? And probably to Mike's surprise, I said the Philadelphia 76ers because they had just fired Doc Rivers, and as expected, James Harden opted out of his contract. And, right now they're stuck with Joel Embiid, who won the MVP, but definitely did not have the juice to finish the season. And, a couple of other players. The conundrum they're in is they're pretty sure Harden's going back to Houston unless Daryl Morey overpays him in Philly. So what do? Do you overpay the guy that showed up for like 2 games in the series against the Celtics, or do you let him go to the Houston Rockets where he's always happier anyhow? Like, I think they're screwed, but I also think, and I've said this before, that the process is dead, and we can never trust the process ever again. Like, that's been wiped out of the sports vernacular. Like, the Sixers, it has been bungled to the point now where trust the process means nothing to me.
Well, I mean, you have to say that these processes in different sports, some have worked and some have not. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know that it didn't work in Buffalo. You tanked for a few years. You ended up with Jack Eichel, really good player. Sam Reinhart, really good player. But they didn't work in Buffalo. They've now gone on someplace else and had success. It did work in Pittsburgh. You had Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Marc-Andre Fleury all top of the draft, and they won a number of Stanley Cups. So
that doesn't mean I'm anti-rebuild. I'm not.
No. But there's no guarantee of success, Kev. It's like
I mean, you just need some luck. I mean, it's not a question of if you commit to a rebuild, you're not guaranteed to win a championship or even to be great, because it's so dependent upon what talent is coming out the year that you have I mean the Oilers have had number 1 picks, but they've had them often in years where the draft class just wasn't very strong.
Right.
And because of that, they haven't, taken forever. Plus, just because you have a good team, there's no guarantee you're going to win. I mean, we're to the point now where we have 32 teams. So, it's the odds against you winning have gotten worse.
But I think you can look at rebuilds and tanking in certain aspects and say that got a team to a certain level, and then then it's up to the construction of the team. It's like in Toronto, the tank worked. They got Austin Matthews. They built a good team, but they have not had the success that I think the design that was meant for with the design that they had. I mean, it was successful in Chicago. They got Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, who I think was a 3rd overall pick. And those 2 players were the cornerstones of 3 Stanley Cups. So
the process gets you a good team. It does. You're always going to get a better team. But it just doesn't mean you're going to be the team.
No, not at all. You got to be lucky. You know what I mean? Like you do. That's just the fact of the matter.
Luck is a major factor, and that's I mean, you do have to again. You look at teams and. Like if the Carolina Hurricanes win, everybody would be like, well, how did those teams pass on Sebastian Aho again? There's always something where a guy always outshoots what his coverage is supposed to be, and he always does a little better and becomes way better than you think he's going to be. Like that does happen, and you may have that guy in the 3rd round in a draft in a certain sport. Again, we spoke to Pat Mahomes Sr. the other day. Look at all the teams that passed on Pat Mahomes, the quarterback. Now, maybe they passed on him because he only started playing football as a 2nd-year guy in high school. But a lot of teams passed on him, and they didn't believe in him enough because they probably said, well, he hasn't played football long enough. He's, maybe he's not that big a guy. And, lo and behold, the Chiefs decided he's our guy, and they're the benefactors.
As a guy that's been around for a while, I've always felt that criticism of who people draft, I mean, it's a little bit more, but not really justified in the NFL because the players are older and you have a better sense on who they are. But I always just sort of roll my eyes when people say, well, this team didn't take David Pasternak and so many teams passed on him. I mean, really, these kids are 18 years old.
Most of the time I do roll my eyes. Like I didn't with Cole Caulfield because the Flyers had 2 chances at him. And you figured at that point they could have gotten him and gotten their extra player too. But like with Pasternak, I remember exactly the circumstance. So I always look at the circumstances like, what's that team going through? What did the board maybe look like? That's what I sort of look like before I criticize.
But even still, it's
still,
and it's not like one or the other. Like you don't know what their list looked like. That he might not have even been close. In
right.
Detroit, they talk about that we should have taken Quinn Hughes, and they didn't.
Right.
Well, in hindsight, that looks totally unforgivable. But at the time, given the circumstance and how everybody thought about certain players, it was a lot more justified than it is now. But would they like to have a do-over on that? For sure. But
yeah, didn't Bouchard go ahead of Quinn Hughes?
Yeah. Well, no, Bouchard fell.
No,
Bouchard fell to.
He fell to 10, but he couldn't get.
Yeah.
But the talk was he was going to go. Like teams liked him better.
Right.
And look what he is now. I think he's pretty.
He is. He's just not Quinn Hughes. But no, I got it. I remember interviewing Quinn Hughes in Dallas, even after being great with the NTDP. And there were still some teams that questioned him. You could tell that there were teams that probably were like, okay, you are great, but you are going to have to overcome the size factor and the fact that you're not that physical or physical at all. And, he did. He overcame everything.
I guess the point, too, with regard to rebuilds and stuff, like, and we're going to get into Kyle Dubas, but, look at this Toronto thing. Like, would it have been different if, like, Brisebois, for example, and Steve Yzerman collaborated on building the Tampa Bay Lightning? Had they been in charge of the Toronto Maple Leafs during this time period, would that have guaranteed that they would have won a cup? Of course not.
No, I think they would have had a better chance, though. I'm going to be honest.
It wouldn't have guaranteed it, but we'll get into it once we start talking about it. Let's get started, and then we'll go into Dubas.
Yeah.
Hello Hockey World. Today is Friday, May 19th, 2023.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, and I'm looking straight ahead.
I'm Kevin Allen. I don't even know what that means. That's my wife, by the way, walking by me.
Mike looked down at the date. That's why.
No, wait, I was looking down at my phone, you moron.
Sure.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com, who gets criticized when he's trying to stay with the news because the news is happening as we speak.
Yeah.
I just love the criticism, and today, and I'm sure Russ will make sure that he says, "Well, Mike was wrong," because it came out.
Said it. I don't have to.
It came out just before noon from Elliot Friedman that the Leafs and Kyle Dubas would be parting ways. Now, we can debate like, okay, and I was debating this with Russ as we before the show, what the details here are in terms of, is this Dubas walking away? Is this the Leafs? I don't know how important that is, but we can discuss that. But this is a seismic event, Kev.
It is, yeah.
He's a young, very talented, very good general manager. And I was sitting about 10 feet away from him on Monday when he talked about, basically he talked about the pressures of the job and his family. And, either he was going to be Leafs GM or he was going to take some time off. And you could see the emotion in his face. And obviously something just is not working here, and they part ways.
Yeah. This fits to what I had heard, 2 months ago from some former Red Wing players who said that, and I assumed they had talked to Brendan. I didn't ask because it was, we were just having a casual conversation, and they said Brendan's okay. He doesn't feel like there's going to be any repercussions on him, but Dubas is in trouble. And I think that was the decision that was made. I think when Dubas was being honest, when he said, I'm going to be a GM here, or I'm not. I'm going to take some time off. But he didn't see this coming exactly. But I think the decision was made for him, so he didn't get to make that choice. That's how it feels to me. I mean, I'm not on the inside of this, but that's how it feels to me. So
okay. Let me tell you what Friedman reported, and Russ can sort of bounce off of that, because the report was that the Leafs, NLS&E, and Dubas began talking about a contract extension after they had beaten Tampa. That they were discussing it back and forth. There was some negotiation going on. I'm paraphrasing here. After they lost to Florida, there was still the line of communication, and they were taken aback by his comments on Monday, because that probably was the first time they had heard him about, either it's this job or no job, and I have to talk to my family about this, and things that rang. Not that didn't ring true, that untrue. I mean, I think he's being truthful in that, but there seemed to be hesitancy on the part of Dubas when it came to extending with the Leafs, and there was no answer all this week. We've gone 4 days, and the clock is ticking here on important things like getting Matthews under contract and deciding on the head coach. And it sounded like, from what Friedman said, is they were getting tired of waiting for a response. And at a certain point, they were like, I don't know if there was a drop dead date or something like that, but it did sound like they wanted to sign him. They wanted to bring him back. And then all of a sudden they just weren't getting an answer. And they said, okay, well, if you're not fully committed, we're just going to move on. Now, Russ, you have a different.
Yeah, well, Mike and I did mention yesterday that the longer it goes, the worse it looks. Like, that's always the case. And so we did both acknowledge that. Initially, I remember speaking to Mike a couple of weeks ago with a scenario that I sort of brought up yesterday. I didn't get it fully into it, but just that, hey, because Mike would always tell me how close Dubas and Keefe were. And like, I was goofing around yesterday on the show about who would get fired on the show, whatever. Kevin wasn't here, so he doesn't know that. But what I would say is this: if a very close friend to me was a coach of a team and I had to fire him to keep my job, and let's say that's the scenario, because we don't know, because I know this has happened in real business, in real life. I've seen it happen where people just will not fire their friend and they leave. I think there's a chance that was the breaking point for even Dubas saying, I'll come back, but I don't want to do that. And maybe MLS and S&E said, well, we're not going to keep him, and so you're gone too. And I just think that there's a chance of that, only because human emotion, when you really like somebody and believe in them, it can make you do some things. So that's just my feeling on it.
I could be wrong, Russ, but I honestly, from everything that I have heard, that wasn't an issue. That, no, I don't think they were. I don't think they were going to give Keefe an extension. They were going to hold Keefe's feet to the fire, just like they held Dubas's feet to the fire. They had a year left in his contract, and they were probably willing to let him stay for another year, if that was the price that they had to pay to get Dubas back. And I'm assuming if Dubas had come back, it was going to be on a multi-year extension. Now, you might be right. He's had Keefe as his head coach going back to Sault Ste. Marie. He had him with the Marlies. He had him with the Leafs. At a certain point, he was probably going to have to. Now, if he doesn't have to do it, then fine. And he thinks he can go out and get another job with another NHL team next year, which I'm sure he'll be the leading candidate for a lot of GM jobs next year. Then Sheldon Keefe, who is probably going to get fired now because Dubas is not there, Sheldon Keefe is probably going to be his coach.
Yeah, I just think if it was burnout, and Kev could answer to this, if it was burnout, I don't think the Leafs are going to say we parted ways with Kyle Dubas.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what doesn't ring true to me. Like, all that scenario that Elliot laid out may be true. Maybe they were frustrated. Maybe they were going to bring him back. But if you love a guy, like if you believe in him, I mean, this sounds almost petulant. Like, well, if you don't want to be here, then we don't want you. I mean, they're not 18 years old. Like this is a multi-million-dollar organization. So what that tells me is, like, they weren't, like, if they were going to bring him back, it wasn't a hard, we really love you, we're going to have you here forever type thing, because it didn't take much, in other words, to move them off of that. Like, I mean, it's only been a couple of days. I just think that, that maybe they had kind of a soft idea that they'd like to bring him back. But then, when he expressed that, and to be honest, what he said isn't really out of hand. Like, you hear guys say that all the time. What do they say at the end of the season when you get pressed on what their future plans are within 24 hours or 48 hours? I need to sit down and talk to my family. And as Russ pointed out the other day, they've already talked to their family. They already know that. But you always say that.
Yes.
You say that because you want a little time. You want to
keep that arm's length.
Yeah, and you want to be able to kind of think about how the season went, and then get your head and arms wrapped around what the issues were and all that. But with regard to the coach, like, this is what happened with the Toronto. Like, I think there's more blame for Keefe here than there is for the general manager. Like, he assembled a really impressive collection of talented players.
Yeah,
and they didn't perform. Now, as I said before, we didn't give the Florida Panthers nearly enough credit for how well they played. However, Mike's right when he says that the top guys didn't step up. I mean, but that's on, that's on Sheldon Keefe. I mean,
it's on Sheldon Keefe. There's no doubt but it's also on them. It's also on those players, and
it's always on the players, but that's not the way the system works.
No. There's always it's easier to fire a coach than to fire.
That's right, and it's pretty clear that whatever it is, he didn't have any magic to sort of figure out whether it was changing lines or demoting someone or sitting somebody out, all the kinds of things that coaches do. But this is bold. I mean, I think Kyle Dubas was sincere.
I just wanted to put that. I
don't think it's a core 4 guy situation, because Dubas said he would look at a lot of different things.
Right, and that's why I put it up.
But I do think that he was probably sincere when he said, because I think he thought he was coming back, that I wouldn't go in the other team. But I know Rob Rossi of Pittsburgh put this out here probably first, but I thought exactly the same thing. Like, all bets are off now. Like if the ownership of the Penguins calls and said, look, we heard you. You don't want to go anywhere. Maybe you'll take the year off. But at least come and talk to us. You owe it to yourself to listen to what we have to say.
Well,
and I got to believe
you're right. I think you're right, Kev, but he's going to be looked at as a villain if he does it.
There is a connect, and this is the reason why there was a lot.
No, he got fired. I don't think he will look like a villain.
Oh, I don't know. Ask Mike.
He got fired.
No, they just didn't renew his contract. I mean,
that's the same. That's the same as being fired.
Right, I know, but the thing is, I do think he would be he'd be looked upon as a liar if all of a sudden he said, I'm either going to be Leafs GM or take time away, and then all of a sudden on July 1st he's the Penguins general manager.
I think he'll get over it if that's the.
Well, yeah, and there is a connection with, and this is the reason why the Pittsburgh rumor had a lot of legs. Apparently, the son of Paul Beeston, the former managing general partner of the Blue Jays, is involved with Fenway Sports Group, and him and Dubas are friendly. So that doesn't mean that he's going to take the job. And there's, they said, Matthew Darsh and a couple other names are leading candidates for the Penguins job, and that they're well advanced in their situation. So, I mean, I'd be surprised if that happens, but we know we're going to see him as general manager of some team pretty soon. don't know if it's going to be this, this upcoming. And also, the Leafs, he's under contract until June the 30th. The Leafs could very easily do what Calgary is doing with Brad for a living and say, no, you can't talk to him until his contract is up.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, and he may take a year off. I mean, maybe he doesn't like the list of teams that, are available now. Maybe he'll wait, for a better offer. But the one thing that we've learned through the years about, general manager openings don't happen as frequently as coaching opportunities. So, there are general managers sitting out there now who you wouldn't have guessed. Like, would you have guessed that Ray Shero would not have a job by now? He did a pretty darn good job with the Pittsburgh.
No, but again, I think he would have had a job in Philly had they done the process differently.
Well, they didn't, and he doesn't have a job. My only point is you can't be assured that you're going to end up back in the league. That's why Kyle Dubas has to, at least pay attention to that. If that's what he wants to do, is to continue on.
Just as you said that, Dubas, I'm sure thought ahead of possibilities. That's the same picture for the Leafs. I don't know if it was Elliott or Jeff Merrick was saying, well, the Leafs and MLS and E can't have gone into this not thinking, well, we have to have a scenario to replace Dubas if Dubas doesn't decide to come back. And of course, names have popped up like Treliving, who, isn't free to talk to anybody until after June the 30th. A couple names popped up, and one would be very surprising. Now, I think the internal possibility of Brandon Pridham, who got mentioned as a potential candidate for Calgary, and he's been mostly a capologist, and obviously he would be probably more of a the hockey operations would be going to other people like I know Jason Spezza, even though he's just retired, was integral in as an assistant to Dubas, and maybe responsibilities he'd be getting more of them if Pridham was promoted from assistant GM to GM. The other one, and this was mentioned by Jeff Merrick, and this would just be bizarre, would be Mark Hunter, the current GM of the London Knights and former assistant GM of the Leafs, who left the organization in 2018 when Kyle Dubas was made general manager. So, Kev, I've looked at, and Mark Hunter was primarily in charge of the draft from 2015 to 2018. And he's had, long ballyhooed record as the London Knights GM, and him and his brother Dale, and that London Knights franchise is a moneymaker and extremely successful. But as an assistant GM, as somebody who was in charge of the draft for 3 years, his drafts other than his first round picks were horrible. And so I mean, if that's what happens, then like somebody just said, clown show. I'm not going to criticize Mark Hunter that much, but I think it would be very curious if they go in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll take a step back here now and think about it harder than they did before, because I'm sure you're right. There was probably a cursory thought about what their options were, but there are some names out there that I'm sure that we're not thinking about, because within the hockey world, there's always an undercurrent of people, especially assistant GMs, that everybody knows are pretty good, but they appear on lists, but they don't have a pedigree, so they don't get up there. So I don't know. I mean, I think we're going to have to kind of wait and see. Feels like the Toronto Maple Leafs ought to have a high profile guy, though. You know what I mean? Like,
Go ahead, Russ.
Kyle Dubas, despite the fact that he came out of nowhere, like he was revered as the next thing. Like he was the young guy that everybody wanted and was interested in. Like you heard him mentioned for a couple of years as like, this guy is gonna, all that kind of stuff. So he had a status even before he got to the NHL. So he does know what he's doing. So it's going to be interesting. If it isn't the Penguins that call, somebody will talk to him or ask to talk to him.
Sure.
Just to make sure. And who knows? Maybe he will just take a year off and see what happened. I mean, Barry Trotz took a year off from coaching. Look at him; he ended up general manager instead of a coach. So
yeah. I'm going to go with Michael Fuda. He's a local Toronto guy. He's got championships under his belt, AHL and NHL. He's a shrewd judge of talent, the same way Dubas was a shrewd judge of talent.
Yes.
And he's in the media right now, and everybody could hear what he's been saying for the last couple of years on Sportsnet. I'm going with Michael Fuda. And then I think they'll go on a coaching search if they do that.
Well, I think there's going to be a coaching search one way or the other. I like now that Dubas is gone, Keefe is a lame duck at the year left, and Brendan Shanahan is talking at 3:00. There's a possibility that he will announce, because they not only did they announce that they're parting ways with Dubas, they let go of their AHL coach and his staff. So Brendan Shanahan is talking at 3:00. It's possible he announces that they're relieving Keefe of his duties, and then it's a clean sweep. Then it's AHL coaching staff, NHL. Spencer Carberry is a lead. Now that's the thing. Spencer Carberry is a leading candidate for the Washington job.
They'll interview him. Whoever the new Leafs GM is, they'll interview Carberry before they let him go to make sure they're not making a mistake. They'll interview him.
Well, I'm right, but the GM, who knows when the new GM will be in place, and it's going
to take that long.
Is Carberry a leading candidate, or was he just interviewed?
No, he's a leading candidate for Washington. He's been interviewed by Anaheim and the
he's
Rangers.
On the Rangers list. I don't think he's talked to him yet.
Yeah, the Rangers asked for permission and will give it to him. So I would think that if they let Keefe go, then he would be somebody that the Leafs would talk to, or maybe they wouldn't even have to talk to him since he's been on their staff for 2 years. So let's just say this: there's been a lot of changes. It sounds like there's going to be a lot more. Now we've got GM gone, probably coach gone, AHL staff gone.
Well, there is some reason for immediacy here, and that is Austin Matthews. You got to cater to him, and there's nothing wrong with that. He is, the gorilla on this team. So you've got to make sure, he's on board. You don't want him to say, I don't like your GM, so I'm done. Move me. So.
Do we know what Carlton's contract status is? Carlton the Bear?
Yes, he's been signed to a 10-year contract. He has a no trade clause, especially to Philadelphia, because he would not want to even be in the same room as that a-hole Gritty. So we'll like I said, Shanahan 3 p.m. today, and we'll find out more about what's going on. But an eventful day.
Something that would be fun. If I worked for the WWE, I would have Kyle Dubas show up as the GM of Raw, because they've had a lot of different people do that for like 1 episode or 2 episodes.
He's a big wrestling fan.
He loves wrestling. It would be tremendous press. They would get so many views on that. It wouldn't even be funny.
Yeah. Well, it'll be fun to see where he lands, because he is going to land. He's a talented guy, so.
Yeah, that's.
I think the league needs people like Dubas. He's modern in his approach. Personally, I think this is. We don't know what the direction of the Maple Leafs will be. I had confidence based on how good I thought Dubas was, how conscientious he was about his job, how intelligent he approached things, how considerate he was towards his players and towards the staff, that the Leafs were going in a very positive direction. And now we don't know what direction they're going to go. And for a franchise as storied as them, with 56 years since they won a Stanley Cup, and now they've won 1 round in 19 years, I can't imagine that the direction that they're going to go is positive, but we'll see. We don't know. Yeah. You're going to be hard pressed to find someone who's got more skills, that you're looking for in a GM than Kyle Dubas.
Yeah, and
seriously, that's just a fact.
That's true. And honestly, Russ, we won't see the benefit of, what Kyle Dubas has done in terms of his drafting for the next couple years.
That's always going to exist, and somebody could really, if Nyes emerges to be let's say a top 25 player in the league, where they drafted him, that's something that's going to look really good for Dubas in his next job.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting though. I thought about this the other day, with regard to I met someone who was a big Red Wings fan who's really, really sharp. And he knew the game, and like I said, very, very professional. That's his job, is very professional. And he just really despises Ken Holland, big Red Wings fan. And of course, Ken Holland was the designer, architect of the Red Wings championships and everything else. But now, like, all that luster has worn off. And, we always exalt people who have a history of being able to win, particularly in players and in management and coaches. And we always talk about the cups they've won. But, it doesn't always work that way. Like, now, like in Edmonton, they don't care that Ken Holland has won cups in the past. All they care about now is, like, you hear people complaining all the time. They need to get rid of Holland. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Listen, I can tell you, after like the first 10 years, Ranger fans didn't care Glenn Sader won championships in Edmonton either.
No, that's what I'm saying. So, I don't know. Like, it's, again, I think you're just throwing darts sometimes when you bring in management. Like, all you can do is find a guy with a lot of different abilities that you need. The ability to, to draft, to have a pretty good scouting eye and all that. But, it's hard. And I remember having this conversation with someone. It's hard to know, like, if we put two scouts next to each other, Devils guy and a Rangers guy, and you say which one is the better scout, like, how the hell do you even possibly know? Right. You don't, you don't know. So, and with all that, being said, all you can do is bring in a guy with a lot of things that look like he should win, and then hope, they do win. And that's what they did with Dubas. They brought in a young
guy.
They
didn't make a wrong decision with Dubas. No way.
No, not at all. And I still don't think it's, you start listing the reasons why they didn't win the Ultimate Cup. Kyle Dubas is well down the list. In my mind.
No. And the main criticism, and the only criticism that I would have of Kyle Dubas, is that he stuck with a philosophy in the first few years that clearly wasn't working, that I criticized. I mean, obviously, spending as much money as they did on 4 players and being wholly dependent on them was a mistake. Now, he did his best over the last couple of years to surround them with players that supported them, that did the things that they can't or don't do. And that's the reason why they beat Tampa. And one of the reasons they beat Tampa, guys adding like O'Reilly and Ashari and Shen. But the problem is that those 4 guys are so integral and important to them having success. And when they don't perform, they don't win. And I think he recognized that they had some shortcomings, but that eventually they would get it, and they haven't gotten it.
Yeah, I mean, every GM has shortcomings. My big thing was they never had enough money for the goaltending, but every GM has shortcomings, like every single one of them.
Right. All right, let's talk about the game last night, because, wow. Like I said, I watched that game. I was like riveted to it. I saw the Lomberg overtime goal that was waved off for goalie interference. I survived to the 3rd overtime, and then I woke up at 4:00 in the morning looking for my phone to find out what the score was. So forgive me, but I think a lot of people were like that.
No, same thing happened with me. I was listening. I went upstairs after the 2nd overtime. I listened to the 3rd overtime, and then at some point I drifted, and that was it.
Yeah, I didn't even attempt the overtime. I got to get up. I do, NHL recap in the morning. Today we had an early deadline, so I had to have something to him at 6:30 in the morning. So I got to usually start at 5 to get all that kind of done. So when you're waking up at 4:30, you don't attempt overtime. So I didn't, but. I did wake up a little bit early and read on the phone, and I loved whoever the story I was reading. I don't even recall now, but did an excellent job of replaying that, what happened. And then, of course, I immediately went over to watch the video. And I love that particular goal because, first of all, the importance of the goal and what happened there. Like, I mean, it was so subtle. Like, I thought it was legitimate, because the goaltending just nicked him enough to move his momentum to the right. And I felt he was unable then to get back in his normal position. That's why I thought it was a legitimate call. But, when you look on Twitter, like, really knowledgeable hockey people are all over the map on this.
Yeah.
And it just, as I said to Mike, it just really brings up that no matter what we do, I mean, because we had good visuals of that. Like this wasn't one where it was hard to see the puck or any of that stuff. Like we saw clearly what happened.
Yeah.
And even when we did, we all can agree. Like I'm totally fine with people who look at that and say, "Oh, come on." You got to let the guys play in front of the net. Like I get that. Now, again, I thought it was the right call, but if you want to make that argument, I'm for that. So it's a hard job.
I mean, I knew it was going to be waved no goal when I saw what happened. There was very little contact, but it was contact that affected the ability of the goaltender to push off.
Right.
Colin White came into the crease and hit the skate of the goaltender, and he was not able to push off with the edge of his right skate to go and block Lomborg's shot. So as soon as they saw that it interrupted his ability to push off, I'm like, no goal.
I think that's legitimate. It's just I'm going to go back to something that Henrik Lundqvist said in the pre-show, and I didn't watch the whole pre-show, but when Gretzky's on, I'll watch a few minutes and see how the interaction is. And I saw that Lundqvist was talking, and so I put it on for a minute, and they talked about how guys are really crashing the net, and he goes, "Listen, goalies now, they know they're all going to get run over, so now they're getting stronger, and they're all realizing how to just be low and strong and overcome those things because they know they're not most of the time they're not getting the calls." So the goalies kind of know this is coming, and this is where I do think they got this one right. But look, we're almost back to the era where the NHL kind of lets there be some contact with goalies because it creates goals. I don't think they protect the goalies like they protect quarterbacks in football. They don't.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah. Now I know that normally, Russ, you like to hurl some criticism at Freddie Anderson. I don't think we can do that.
No, he had a good game.
He had a good game.
And you know what I want to say about Burns? Burns was the typical – he was mentally tired. That play is just – that turnover is just from being mentally tired from playing all those overtimes and all those minutes. So that's why I would never even fault the player because you go trying out, play defense, and play perfect – through all these overtimes and not lose a game. It's hard to do, man.
Well, the thing that I always love to look at the time on ice for each team in a game like that, and when you see who was it? Brandon Montour, 57 minutes, 56 seconds. I mean, it's just obscene. And now like Burns played 54 minutes, leaving 51.
He's 38 years old, right?
Yeah, speaking of Burns, like we should talk about him a little bit. I want to make this point. That defense before he got there was good. It was a really good defense. So I get that, he's a guy that's pretty well respected around the league and he can still play. But for him to come in there into that group, which is pretty cohesive, and have the impact to the point now where is there any doubt that he's the guy there on that defense now? No. There's no doubt whatsoever. And I will say this too. He was sold on the idea before he got there. He came in, he worked out with those guys in the summer. And I think it will take 5 minutes to re-sign him for next year. And
I agree.
Even though he's going to be 38, I think if he wants 2 years, I give it to him.
I give him 2 years. I wouldn't even hesitate.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's still a very, very effective player.
I had the chance to interview him before he got to the team. And I believed everything he said about like where he felt like he was in the right place and this felt like home to him and everything. It all shows. But I want to tell you what I think Florida was doing, which was smart. And this is how they scored early and not how they scored late, but how they scored early. They decided they're going to throw the puck deep and win the puck battle near or around the net. And if they do, if they have someone around the net, they're going to try that bing bang, where you get a pass behind the net to someone cutting through and get a goal. And they did get some of that action early on. And I think they're going to keep doing that because they have just enough speed where they could beat the defenders of Carolina to the puck, to that puck race.
Wow.
And that is something.
The other thing, too, that's worth bringing up, and, we've talked about this. I always talk about luck. I always say when I write my book about my career covering the NHL, there's going to be an entire chapter on how luck changes everything. Well, even on that winning goal, when you go watch the replay, Jake Slavin, who is a very effective defenseman, consistent performer, makes a clearing attempt, and it hits the referee.
Yeah.
Hits the referee, doesn't get out. The puck goes to Sam Bennett. Bennett then immediately, because this is the NHL and this is what happens.
Yeah, it was Slavin. That's who I said. I said the wrong guy. Yeah.
And then suddenly the puck is in the net. And, that puck could have not hit the referee, could have slid by him, and, we'd still be playing maybe.
You know what I liked at the end of that game, though? Florida left the ice as quick as a team could ever leave the ice, like it was on fire. They were just like, they felt like, they got their luck, like you said, and they were like out of there. They were like,
they wanted to get undressed and go home and go back to the hotel and go to sleep. That's
no. I actually heard the interview. That's the point I was going to make too. Kachuk was interviewed. I don't know which show, but anyway, he said they were talking to him. He goes, just like you said, he said, a thing like this, you feel drained, but you feel less drained because you won. And all I know is the team bus is a 2:25 departure back to the hotel, some food in me. He said, then get some sleep, and first team to recover will be in the best shape for next game. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I'll just say this: because obviously I saw Florida play for 5 games against Toronto, and I picked Carolina in the series, but I thought the one chance that Florida had would be Bobrovsky standing on his head like he did in the Toronto series, which I think he did yesterday, and Florida being able to impose their physical will on Carolina, which would have been a tougher thing to do because Carolina is more suited to be able to withstand that. Bennett was doing that. Lomborg was hitting people against the board. I mean, they're just a bunch of Energizer bunnies, Kev, and they keep doing that. They're going to win.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I took Florida only because I've been most impressed by them of any other team. Like, I think they've played good hockey all the way through. They've got momentum, but even beyond that, they're just playing well, and their goaltender has been good. So they seem to have all the measures. Carolina has been pretty impressive too, I think.
Yes.
But, I just think Florida has been, to me, the most impressive teams thus far.
They keep gaining momentum. Like they're the one team that keeps gaining momentum.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've known Bob for a long time, and because I knew the person who used to translate for Bob here in Philly, I got to know the personality pretty good because a lot of times stuff wouldn't come out in the press, but I would hear about it. And the one thing I've watched him a lot of games, and he has not panicked at all, and he has not looked bad at all. And I do think the more confident he gets like this, to me, I'm going to tell you who he reminds me of. He's reminding me of Hobby Bullen when Tampa won. Like, there was a lot of criticism with Hobby Bullen, right? And then all of a sudden he went and won a cup. The minute Hobby Bullen was gone, Tampa couldn't win a cup anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I think people, and we'll get off of this and talk about Dallas Vegas starting tonight in a minute. The one thing that people I think underestimate is the resilience of Florida. I mean, I give Carolina all the credit. They beat the Islanders, they beat New Jersey. That was, compared to Florida, it was an easy road. I mean, Florida beats Boston, then Toronto, 2 teams that I think they were underdogs against. But I thought that they were going to break after that goal late in the first period, where Maurice is going absolutely insane on the bench because the referees gave Carolina a 5-on-3 power play, and Bobrovsky made about 3 unbelievable saves, and then Carolina scored with like 10 seconds left to go in the first period and got the early goal, and the crowd went nuts. And I'm like, okay, this is where a lesser team would crumble. And they didn't. And they came back and they scored 2 goals in the second period. So they're very resilient. I give them a lot of credit. And I mean, again, we'll see, where this series goes. I picked Carolina in 6, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I picked Florida based on Bob. I did. I said I felt like that was the one little edge they have, and we'll see if it holds up. But, again, if Carolina goes to Raanta now, that game wasn't Freddie Anderson's fault. So it's like, again, I don't think I would move off of Anderson right now, but they might. Who knows?
He's played well, to be honest.
Yeah, and that was his first loss.
That was his first loss. Like we talked about.
Would they go to Ranta out of because Anderson is fatigued? I mean, I don't know.
Again, you're going to face another goalie who you're assuming is equally fatigued.
Right.
So it shouldn't really matter. I don't think that's going to. To me, it wouldn't be the difference, but they have flip-flopped their goalies quite a bit. So who knows?
So, all right. So tonight, the Western Conference Final starts. Dallas and Vegas. I got X prediction, which was which was Dallas in 6 games. Now, I looked at I said this before. Maybe I'll be wrong. I think the Stanley Cup champion is coming out of this series. I picked Dallas to come out of the West, and obviously I'm revealing who I'm picking. I actually had Dallas in 6 games. But I mean, it's not impossible, Kev, that Vegas wins this series. I look at these teams. I think they're pretty equal. I think Dallas's defense is great. Vegas's defense is really good. I think it comes down to Ottinger versus Aiden Hill. And obviously, I think Ottinger is the much better goaltender, but Aiden Hill got them past Edmonton. So I don't say that it's impossible that Vegas wins, but I just think Dallas is the better overall team.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm taking Vegas on a hunch more than anything else. Like Dallas is to me is the most underrated team in the league for this reason. They're number 3 in defense ranking this season. They had the number 3 goals against average, and they were number 7 in scoring, which speaks to the fact that Rube Hintz and Robertson have really come on and been a force. And, Ben and Sagan had surprisingly good seasons as well. So that, they had enough scoring, everything else, and their goaltender is consistent. And you look at all the numbers and it adds up. But, Vegas seems to have figured out, how to, win in this postseason. Like, it doesn't seem to matter who they have in goal, and their defense has been pretty good. Jack Eichel was playing really well. Mm-hmm. They got a lot going on. So just on a hunch more than anything else. And sometimes with these series, it's a toss-up anyway. You might as well go with kind of a gut feeling. That's what I'm going with.
I mean, Russ, the funny thing is with Dallas, I mean, Heiskanen gets hurt. It doesn't seem to faze him. Pavelski gets hurt. He's out for a few games. He comes back. He doesn't seem to faze him. Robertson's not scoring as much as people thought he was going to, but he gets picked up by a guy like Max Domi, who's in double fame, who's having a fantastic playoff right now. I know I got him in my fantasy hockey pool. Thank you very much. But what I'm saying is that Dallas is getting picked up by their depth players. They're getting scoring throughout their lineup. And like Kevin said, Sagan and Ben have been, they look like they've gone to the fountain of youth. Sagan was struggling through the playoffs a few years ago in the bubble. Now he looks fantastic. What are your thoughts on this series?
Yeah, my thoughts are, again, with Vegas's issue in net, I'll still take Jake Ottinger over them every day of the week. And Heiskanen's better than any blue liner on Vegas, even though Petrangelo's played great. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. But Heiskanen, he's been out of his mind. He's been so good in every facet of the game that I look at those two things and then the Pavelski factor and all that. And I go Dallas in 6 because they had been there before. And I'm keeping waiting. And maybe it won't happen. And Eichel's been great. But I just think that Vegas goaltending at some point does become a problem. And we'll see.
Well, do we think we'll see Jonathan Quick?
No,
not at all. I want to make one point about Heiskanen, and that is that had he played in that 4 overtime game, he would have broken
Seth
Jones' record. And they've only been measuring. I know Russ might know this, but for the others, they've only been measuring time on ice since 1970, 97, 98. But Seth Jones has the record, 64 plus minutes, something like that. Yeah,
65 something. I think.
Something in that range. But Heiskanen would have broken that because, he plays 30 minutes in a regulation 60-minute game. So, in that game, he would have, I clearly believe he would have broken that record.
But one other thing, some not so much breaking news, but breaking for this show. It's going to have to do with Arizona. And Craig Morton put on his Twitter account that Clayton Keller's father said, "I'm writing to inform anyone who read those messages that my Twitter account was hacked."
There you go.
I mean, okay. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm getting a little tired of this, Kev. It's like,
Yeah.
it's getting to the point where even if it happened, nobody's going to believe it. And if you want further proof that things are going on there, Logan Cooley's going back to school, and he is clearly ready to play in the NHL. Like, he could play in the NHL tomorrow, but he's not going.
Logan
Yeah,
Cooley.
I mean, my take on all that, and I had sent a message to you about all this. I don't doubt that players are unhappy. They want this to be settled. They want to know what's going on, but they don't. They're not going to risk paychecks over this. They're going to show up and play hockey. Now,
they probably just wanted it to get out there to make a point.
Yeah, sure. But, will he ask to be traded? I mean, maybe.
Well, Keller, the report came out today. Keller met with the Coyotes management and wanted to know, what the future of the team and where it was going.
Yeah, and the ownership said to them, I'd like to know too.
I thought the ownership did this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, they don't know either. I mean, they're trying everything. I do think it's interesting. Like, I get that, that the social media forces are not always in sync with the team, but for them to put out a poll about where would you like to see the next arena.
Oh, that was brutal.
Well, it wasn't brutal. It was actually hilarious, but I don't think it was probably a good look for him.
It wasn't smart. It wasn't smart. It wasn't.
The troll in me had to respond. I included a little video snippet of Val Kilmer saying, "I'm your Huckleberry" from the movie Tombstone, and said, "Tombstone, where franchises go to die." Yeah. Because honestly, and that's, I mean, they've been given enough chances to get this right. Now, I'm not saying that the NHL, my thing here, Kev, and maybe I think they should move this team, move it someplace that actually has ownership, building, management, all in the same row. And once Arizona gets their situation straight, if they get a building and an owner, then you give them an expansion team. But right now, this is toxic and it keeps going on, and it's got to stop.
Well, I mean, I do think they're headed in that direction. It just won't happen as quickly as the thought that and I had said this to Russ as well and privately, but it's really difficult. And, Russ made the point, and I think it's a valid one about how quickly Winnipeg was. But I ran that by people, and they reminded me what I had forgotten. Winnipeg was already set up. We had a team in the building, owner in place. They had sales teams. They had marketing. They had already done a marketing study on how much NHL tickets could be sold for. So it was seamless. None of that exists anywhere. And I ran it by, actually, because I'm doing a story on this. I checked on buildings, and most major arenas, especially if they have an NBA team, are well over 100 dates already locked up. Yeah. And it takes between 45 and 60 days to put together a sales staff. So you got 2 months just to get a staff together to start doing that. And the studies of ticket pricing. Now, it would be better if you went to a city that an NBA owner was buying the team, because he would have a lot of that stuff done and have a sales staff. So, I'm sure that they're looking at that as well. If you can convince an NBA owner to.
Well, the Kansas City one where Pat Mahomes, the quarterback, said, "Why don't you move here?" They do have an ECHL team, so they would have a sales staff. And you do wonder, because they wouldn't have a lot of dates committed, you do wonder if that would work temporarily, Kev.
Well, the only two options that didn't have NBA teams were Kansas City and Quebec City, and we know it's not going to happen in Quebec City. Salt Lake was NBA owner. I think his name is Will Smith or something. Yeah, I can't remember for sure. And Houston, and the Rockets are there. They would have the sales staff, but then the dates. I mean, they might have the available dates. Yeah. So.
That's the problem. This concerts, there's concerts already booked for next, February and March. It's just hard. And, there's, you'd have to get a staff together. Not everybody will want to come from Arizona, and some will not be invited. If it's a new owner, he's going to want his own people. It's, It's just not.
This. All right, so Kev, we'll just go with the premise that they're not moving, even though I still think there's a minute chance of this year. Let's just say they're not. How much more rope does the league really even give this owner to find something? Like, again, if the NHL decides that they're going to still let this team try and find something, then they're going to be in the same boat again in June.
No,
about being booked a year out. So I don't know if they can do that.
They're already exploring,
Yeah.
options for next year. So, and the other thing too is, they could reach some sort of agreement with somebody and say, look, keep your books clear because we're coming to you.
Right.
We're going to give them till whatever and see what they can find. But if they couldn't find one by now, like I don't see where it's going to come from unless they somehow
walk into the Quebec building. It's it doesn't have a hockey team there, and you could walk in there for a season. You could.
Well, I don't think you'd want to do that, but
that would be a big tease there, Russ. If you
I think it would be. I don't think that would be good, but anyway, I think the NHL now has finally crossed over. I think their realization, but I think they're also not going to rush it. Like it seems silly to say rush it at this time, but now all of a sudden you're going to say, all right, we made our decision, so now we're going to try to start up. It's one of the GMs said to me when I called and talked about it, he goes, we're expecting to get our early release look at the rough draft of the schedule soon, and now suddenly you're going to, but, I don't think that would be a big deal because you can just replace one with the other. The schedule is the
schedule. That's
it. The least of the problems. Although, as he said, we're all watching our nickels on travel now. So, it's not easily convenient. Like you don't want to, be on a California trip and then suddenly have to fly to Quebec City. It's not ideal. But, I think those kind of things could be worked out. But I do think, trying to get, the marketing in the city, and depending on what city you go to, we could see another Seattle, Vegas type thing where they sell out in a day. So once you get to that point,
right.
But you got to get there. That's the issue.
When
you got to get
the league will actually say that this is going to occur.
So, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know what time date is on that, but I think it'll be sometime during the season. I was told when I started to do the story too that both Hartford and Quebec City both knew it was their last game. Like they had a celebration of the last game. So, we could see that in Arizona too.
All right. Great show, guys. We'll be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.